the importance of having two legitimate arms in today's college football, especially if you're going to contend in a four-team college football playoff format. And we've seen that already. Bryce Young, the Heisman winner from last year, going down. Jalen Milro has been able to steady the ship, stepping in against Arkansas last week, earlier in the first half, and then this week against A&M, making enough plays to help Alabama overcome and win that game. Drew, Hudson Card with Texas, we talked about in the beginning of the year, that quarterback battle. We said, hey, Hudson Card was going to be needed at some point in this season to win the game. He steadied the ship there as Texas is starting to find their footing. But we could go on and on here. And on the flip side of that, we've kind of seen what has happened to teams like Oklahoma, who have gotten in the situation where they have failed to create an explosive play since Dylan Gabriel left last week against TCU. So this is important, but not only currently, and we're seeing that play out in the current landscape of college football, but when you look at this, Drew, what are your thoughts and your opinions on the shape of your quarterback room, and how do you not only recruit but retain two arms, which are very important to your success?
I think it's one of the biggest kind of storylines that's brewing right now in college football. How do you manage those rooms? And I think when you have a quarterback room, normally you have the starter, a guy behind him, and a guy behind him. But all those guys that are in there, you need to think that they have a chance. Once someone leaves for the NFL, once someone graduates, hey, the next guy's up, and then it's eventually going to be my turn. And obviously at Oklahoma, a lot of people left for USC, but I think the big picture is you build out a roster, you gotta figure out how to make everyone believe that they have a chance of coming in. And obviously it's Alabama, but I think with Jalen Milro and Bryce Young there, I mean, Nick Saban has this thing figured out. And look, they got two quarterbacks committed right now heading into next year. But I just think one of the big storylines, how do you make that quarterback room work in an era now where kids can move around so freely, right? You don't have to be a grad transfer. You can transfer one time and be eligible right away. I mean, with Jalen Milro, I think what's unique about him is he just gives Alabama a little something different on offense with his legs. He ran for 83 yards in that win over Texas A&M. So something to think about when we talk about not only the transfer portal market, but quarterback rooms. I mean, what are they going to do at Texas A&M? Because they don't have an arm committed right now in the class of 2023. They aren't in on anyone in 2024. So do you take another transfer? I think that's something that we need to talk about and address.
Well, let's talk about that right now since you bring it up. Haynes King, who played pretty well, was this past week against Alabama, almost won that game. The Aggies on a last-second play there, but Haynes King, the starter coming in the season, we've seen a little bit of Max Johnson. He goes down with an injury last week, the transfer from LSU, and you start to look at Texas A&M's quarterback room and the future of it. Jimbo Fisher right now sitting at 3-3. There's been a lot of talk about a stale type of offense that Jimbo Fisher is running. Has he evolved as a play caller? Would he give up those type of duties to give up to maybe get more of a refreshed lens for the Aggies offense? But Drew, it is a interesting question because, some of these names come up. We start thinking about guys like Dante Moore and Malachi Nelson. Malachi Nelson obviously committed to the Trojans. Dante Moore committed to Oregon. A lot of these top arms that have been on campus in College Station for Texas A&M. Jaden Rashada, another one, committed to Miami. Austin Novosad was a guy really flirting with the Aggies at one point as well. And as much as Jimbo Fisher loves Conor Wegman, and as much as we really like Conor Wegman in the evaluation process, that is a lot of weight on his shoulders to be the person that is the key to success for Texas A&M in their future. Because, Drew, we saw it this weekend, the amount of freshmen that Texas A&M played this weekend against Alabama, and a lot of these guys not shy of the big moment in this game. I mean, these guys are going to be ready to be a contender in the SEC West if they can get the other aspects of their program together, and that's a big if.
Yeah, and with Conor Wegman, when you watch Texas A&M, it seems like the quarterbacks, they're so scripted in what they do. It's a simple drop. You go through your progressions, and that's it. There's no improvising. There's no get outside the pockets. And from what I saw of Conor Wegman on the TV games, from what I saw of him at Under Armour All-America game last year, I think he's at his best when he's on his move and kind of freelancing a little bit. So I think that's one thing you got to address with Texas A&M. Cooper, we just saw that graphic come up of all the quarterbacks, the top-ranked guys in the class of 2023. You know who intrigues me on that list for potentially for Texas A&M? Our guy Avery Johnson, a true dual threat talent that can stretch it out and let it fly down the field. I'm not saying Texas A&M should go in that direction, but to me, when you look at that quote unquote stale offense, I think Avery's someone that can provide a spark given what he can do with his legs, just when you look at the rest of that group that we got at the top.
And we'll wait and see with Conor Wegman. I think the thing about him that's different, he kind of offers a little bit of a different dynamic in that offense, maybe similar to Kellen Mond and what he brought, a guy that you have to account for with his legs. So we'll see what happens there with Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M, as right now a lot of expectations for the Aggies coming into the season. They're sitting at 3-3. It's been a roller coaster of a year, but Drew, a team that has struggled, especially since the absence of Dylan Gabriel when he left with concussion-like symptoms against TCU, has been Oklahoma. We talked a lot at the beginning of the season. Maybe this was an area of concern, the lack of depth and the lack of experience in Oklahoma's quarterback room. Well, you look to the future, and they're in really good hands. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic, because that means five-star Jackson Arnold is on his way to Norman. And Drew, the more I watch this guy, 20-2 as a starter, 6A competition in the state of Texas at Denton Guyer, 60% completion rate, very athletic, a guy to me that is very well seasoned and plays at a high level of football in the state of Texas. Elite 11 MVP. I think from a temperament standpoint and from a skill set standpoint, there is a really good chance that he could see the field early. Obviously, that's going to depend a lot on what happens with Dylan Gabriel. He's got another year of eligibility, but Jackson Arnold, to me, is a guy that can step in day one and make an impact in Norman.
Well, as crazy as it sounds, Cooper, I mean, we're 6 games into the season. We're already talking about the quarterback of the future. You go back to that Red River Showdown, or whatever they call it now. Nick Evers never got into the game. The former Elite 11 quarterback from last year, who Jeff Levy and co flipped really late from Florida in the cycle. Remember, Billy Napier came in. Nick Evers was all but set to go to UF in Gainesville, and he ends up flipping over to the Sooners, signs with him. I was shocked he did not get on the field. I mean, you can, as a freshman, you can preserve a red shirt and still appear in 4 games. Why not get him some live reps? So I think I know you are all in on Jackson Arnold. I'm still kind of a little hesitant, wait and see mode. I still got that bad taste from the Under Armour Future 50 event where Jackson struggled a little bit, and I know it's 7-on-7. But yeah, I think if you're a Sooners fan, number one, you got to address that defense. They got to figure that out. And we've said, Cooper, that the number one thing there is going to be keeping that group together that's committed. There's a lot of potential difference makers there, but you got to start, buying in and investing into Jackson Arnold being the future a lot sooner rather than later.
Sooners going through it right now, 49-0 loss to Texas, as Texas avenges that loss from last year, Steve Sarkisian in his first year. So Brent Venables, Steve Sarkisian could definitely relate in year one right now, going through a lot of adversity. To me, Drew, just the last thing on Oklahoma, they have the right pieces. I believe in Brent Venables. I believe in what they're doing. I believe in what they're bringing in, and I believe in the offense coordinator in Jeff Levy. So a lot of adversity right now for a lot of first-year head coaches, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Drew, one of the last segments here that we are going to hit on, Texas. We're going to talk about that team a little bit, and there's been a lot made about the quarterback situation. Quinn Ewers coming back off the injury, obviously playing really well there. The skill position, what they're bringing in addition to guys like Xavier Worthy and some of the guys they already have in the boat. But Drew, the running back position, I feel as much as we talk about Texas, we don't talk enough about Bijan Robinson. And that's kind of crazy because I feel like everybody else does that for us. But one of the most dynamic players in the country, and as Bijan is certainly going to leave for greener pastures here, they're going to take his talents to Sundays. Drew, there's another guy from the state of Florida that's going to be playing his ball in Austin here pretty soon that you feel pretty good about.
Cedric Baxter Jr. I mean, this guy's having as good of a senior season as I think anyone in the country. Through 6 games, he's rushed for 128 times for just over 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns, averaging 9.3 yards per carry. He ran for 272 against Don Bosco out of New Jersey. I mean, this guy is a beast. So I think when everyone thinks about Texas, Bijan's eventually going to be gone. Everyone wants to talk about the quarterbacks, Quinn Ewers. He's got this talented arm, and then you got Arch Manning coming in. Well, I think when we look into the crystal ball for the Longhorns, they're not going to miss a beat at running back. And Tashard Choice, the running backs coach there, I think he deserves a ton of credit for getting Baxter committed. And what's crazy is they could get the number one guy in the class of 2024 after Baxter and Jarrett Gibson. So I think the ground game looks good for Texas moving forward. I think if you're Oklahoma, we'll see how the schedules shake out as both those schools enter SEC play. But anyone that has to square off with UT moving forward is going to have to worry about stopping that run. And I think Cedric Baxter, he's one of the best. Coop, I've said it in the past. He's a guy that I'm pounding the table for him to get that 5th star. So all Texas fans know that I really, really like him.
On the cusp right now, the number 31 player in the top 247, and number 2 running back behind Texas native Reuben Owens, currently committed to Louisville. Cedric Baxter, listen, when I look at Bijan Robinson, when I look at Roschon Johnson, what Texas has in their backfield, you better be able to catch the football. Texas uses all 3 of their backs beautifully. You throw in Keelan Robinson there. I love Steve Sarkisian and his offense, the way he utilizes his backs. I think that's a part of Cedric Baxter's game, Drew, that we've seen in person at these 7-on-7 events. And people say, hey, what can you get from live exposure at 7-on-7? Well, a lot of the time Cedric Baxter is split out, or a lot of the times you get a really good feel for how these guys catch the ball and run out of the backfield. Can they separate? Cedric Baxter, a big back, but very sudden, and a guy, to me, that's a very natural pass catcher. I look forward to that in Austin. Drew, I don't know how you feel about that, but that's kind of the way I see it. I like his upside as a receiver.
Well, it's funny, Cooper. Cedric Baxter, the first time I ever met him, I went by his school, and his coach told me, hey, I think he's a safety long-term. I think he's an NFL safety. Then they tried him out at wide receiver, and he eventually found his way to running back. So I agree. I remember Pylon, Orlando, we were freezing our butts off out there. I don't even think you had a sweater. Like, you were just trying to shove your hands into your gloves. And Cedric Baxter, I remember, had like 4 touchdowns one game, and that was an elite tournament. But you're right. I mean, you can see a guy, his ball skills, how they track it. And most of the time on these Friday nights, those guys don't get a ton of screens. They just hand it to him. So we know he can catch the ball, and I think that is certainly a plus for Texas.
Well, I'll tell you this, that video game's coming back, NCAA football coming back next year. Texas right now, between Quinn Ewers, Xavier Worthy, what they have coming with Cedric Baxter Jr., and then not to mention Dante, Cook, Ryan Niblett, a lot of speed, a lot of dynamic playmakers on offense. I can tell you that's probably going to be the most played with team on NCAA football 2024. So looking forward to that.